In this fourth part, we are going to continue with the news. You will see that there is less, but you will see that there is more reading concerning the conflict of the centuries, where we will advance in the reading of that chapter, which will unite all these news in a very clear way. A War Against Faith. Mike Johnson criticizes the drag parody at the opening of the Olympic Games in Paris. I guess many of you already saw it. Well, let's see what it says. It was a July 28th news item.
The President of the U.S. House of Representatives, Mike Johnson, has condemned the alleged parody of The Last Supper, starring a group of drag queens during the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games, which took place this Friday in Paris. The Republican congressman stated this Saturday in his networks that the mockery of The Last Supper was shocking and insulting to Christians around the world. The war against our faith and our traditional values knows no bounds today. But we know that truth and virtue will always prevail, he stressed, adding a biblical passage. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Many of the scenes presented during the show have elicited strong reactions on social networks. The Last Supper, Jesus' final meal before the crucifixion, according to religious accounts, was staged with drag queens characters in the role of the apostles. In the controversial composition, a DJ played the role of Jesus.
Right. If you've noticed the controversy about that scene they did, here in the United States it's been seen as something really negative. It's been the same thing, even with Erdogan, the minister of Turkey, who says that this has also affected Muslims. But in a special way in the Christian world. Catholicism, of course, has also, how couldn't? Obviously, in Europe, it has been very tightly pressed, saying that this has been a scandal of absolute shamelessness and that it cannot be tolerated, that this must have some restrictions. The same thing is happening here in statements that have been made by people from the United States at the political level. Once again, are you noticing how it is a provocation that is premeditated so that there will be a reaction? Yes, and this is what they are preparing. The same thing you are seeing in the United States is also being prepared in other places such as Europe. And papal power through all these issues, through morality as the prophecy says, will again assume world power. That's why these kinds of things happen. USA, by law the Ten Commandments will be expounded in schools. Some have questioned whether the law is constitutional and vow to challenge it in court, July 28th. It is related to what we had seen, but gives additional data and is from a Catholic media outlet.
A new law in Louisiana allows the Ten Commandments to be displayed in all public school classrooms as a GOP action in promoting forgotten values. Republican Governor Jeff Landry signed into law on June 19th, a bill calling for the display in poster format in large, easily readable print of the Ten Commandments in all public classrooms, from kindergartens to state-funded universities. The vote in May had 79 votes in favor, 16 against, and 10 abstentions. Landry argued, if you want to respect the rule of law, you have to start with the original legislator, who was Moses, who received the commandments from God. Some have questioned whether the law is constitutional and vow to challenge it in court. Others point out that the measure is not exclusively religious, but has a historical basis, stating that, from a legal perspective, the Ten Commandments are foundational documents of our state and national government. Dodie Horton, a state representative and proponent of the law, considers the commandments to be the foundation of all laws in Louisiana.
Have you noticed which party is moving this promotion of forgotten values the most? The Republican Party.
The U.S. Constitution calls for a separation of church and state and specifies that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free practice thereof. It should be emphasized that the Ten Commandments are admitted by Catholic, Protestant, Orthodox, and even Muslim Jews, and their value in the universal history of law is undeniable.
But we have already seen that they are not the same Ten Commandments for all.
The use of a multi-religious version of the Ten Commandments overcomes the charge of support for a particular religion, which would violate the separation between state and churches. The law also authorizes, but does not require, the display of other items in public schools, such as the Mayflower Compact, signed by religious pilgrims on the Mayflower ship during 1620 and named the first Constitution of the United States, as well as the Declaration of Independence and the Northwest Ordinance, which established a government in the Northwest Territory, a channel for admitting new states into the Union. The secularist and anti-religious lobbies in the United States, namely the American Civil Liberties Union, the Americans United for Separation of Church and State Group, and the Southern Poverty Law Center, announced to take the case to court in a joint statement, arguing that the law goes against the Constitution because the First Amendment guarantees us the right to personally decide our religious beliefs, if we have any, without pressure from the government. In fact, on June 24th, they filed suit to block the law. Decades ago, Congresses in Texas, Utah, and Oklahoma tried to pass laws similar to Louisiana's, but gave up for fear of lengthy legal battles that would end up in the then hostile Supreme Court. Today, it possesses a profile more amenable to the proposal.
Well, you see what? This is still being talked about. Days go by and it still gets tossed around. But now look at this. Trump condemns the opening of the Paris Olympics. It was terrible. It was a disgrace. See how he positions himself in the face of all this also as a moral leader in this purpose of returning to Christianity. Let's read only the part in red.
Likewise, in the view of the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, also a Republican, Mike Johnson, the mockery of Da Vinci's The Last Supper was shocking and insulting to Christians around the world who watched the opening ceremony of the Olympics. The war against our faith and our traditional values knows no bounds today.
Notice it's on plain sight already. It's a war of faith. And a war of faith and traditional values is also a war. This means that, logically, there is conflict. Some defend a type of freedom in quotation marks that includes all these types of scenarios, and others take the position that this cannot be. Automatically, everything is fragmented. How to solve it? What solution could you see? An easy one, because one must impose itself on the other, and you know how it ends. Millions of Christians should take note. Mike Johnson criticizes America's failure to condemn the Last Supper at the Olympics. But when he says the U.S. didn't condemn, and we see many people who did, himself included since he is a politician, then who is he referring to that didn't condemn it? To Biden supporters and those in power. So they are already moving one Christian group against another that does not have the same ways of looking at things. Polarization is instigated.
The White House had every opportunity to condemn the shameful mockery of Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper at the opening of the Olympics, but refused to do so, U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson said on social media Tuesday. His silence should be taken as an endorsement. The more than 200 million Christians in America should take note, he wrote in a post on the X platform.
200 million Christians in the USA. Then they should take note because the government is not endorsing that this should be stopped. It's clear where it's all going.
Johnson also attached a video of a press conference by White House spokeswoman Karine Jean-Pierre, in which she declined to answer questions about President Joe Biden's opinion of what happened in Paris. I appreciate the question, but I have nothing to share, she pointed out to the spokeswoman. When told that Christians have been offended, Jean-Pierre let out a chuckle and continued to dodge answering. I just answered your question. I don't have anything to add, she said with a chuckle. Joe Biden has yet to comment on the event. However, his wife Jill praised the opening ceremony, calling it spectacular. Every moment I was thinking, Oh my God, oh my God. How are we going to top this? She expressed, referring to the fact that the next Olympics will take place in Los Angeles.
Therefore, we see that here we are blatantly shown that neither the president, nor his wife, nor practically anyone in his party put a stop to all this. They do not complain, therefore they support it. More and more, the division is resounding. Trump says Democrats going after Catholics and singles out Harris for criticism of Colon Knights. Wow. Well, you know that, of course, from the moment Kamala Harris moves into the potential presidential nomination position, the verbal language has escalated even more than it did with Biden, and it's an ongoing confrontation. If you follow the news, he is calling her anything but pretty. And, logically, Kamala is no slouch either. The divide continues to absolutely grow more and more. But what she's telling us here is that the Democrats are going against the Catholics. They're going after the Catholics. And that Harris, what he has done is to criticize the Knights of Columbus, which I would say is the masonry of the Catholic world for philanthropic work and to continue spreading Catholicism in the United States from economic places of power. News of August 1st. This is not so many days ago.
Former President Donald Trump has accused Democrats of persecuting Catholics and sharply criticized his opponent, Vice President Kamala Harris, for aggressive questioning of judicial nominees who are members of the Knights of Columbus. In a July 26 speech at Turning Point Action's Believers Summit, Trump alleged that somebody doesn't like Catholics in this administration, adding that, "I don't think it's President Joe Biden, because I don't think he has any idea what the hell he's doing."
You see where the criticism about Biden is going to.
I don't know how a Catholic can vote for Democrats because they go after Catholics almost as much as they go after me, the former president said. How can a Catholic person vote for a Democrat with what they're doing to Catholics? I just don't get it.
See where he takes a stand.
Trump headlined the event, which took place on July 26 to 28. The summit, which featured numerous Christian speakers, focused on empowering attendees with practical knowledge and strategies for living their faith boldly, encountering the prevailing woke narratives with grace, truth, and conviction, rooted in the gospel, according to the event's website.
You already see that he's teaming up with Christian exhibitors a lot. This is tremendous because he's running his campaign fully backed by religious themes.
In his speech, Trump pledged to stop the Biden-Harris administration's militarization of law enforcement against Americans of faith, and no longer will the Department of Justice and FBI be allowed to target, persecute, or round up Christians or pro-life activists and imprison them for living out their religious beliefs. As part of its criticism of the current administration, the Trump campaign has pointed to the leaked Richmond FBI memo from February 2023, which showed the agency investigating an alleged link between radical traditionalist Catholics and the far-right white nationalist movement. The FBI withdrew the memo immediately after it was made public. An April report from Biden's Justice Department asserted that there was no evidence of malicious intent in the creation of the document. The former president's campaign has also focused on the Justice Department's recent aggressive arrests and prosecutions of pro-life activists who were convicted of violating the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act FACE. Several of the activists are Catholic. Many Republican lawmakers have accused the Justice Department of targeting pro-life activists while failing to adequately investigate crimes against pro-life centers that help pregnant women, which Attorney General Merrick Garland has denied. In his speech, Trump referenced one of the pro-life activists, Paulette Harlow, a Catholic who was sentenced earlier this year to 24 months in prison for participating in a pro-life blockade of a Washington, D.C. abortion clinic. From the moment I win the election, I will quickly review the cases of all the political prisoners who have been unjustly victimized by the Biden-Harris regime, so that we can get them out of prison and return them to their families where they belong, the former president said. There are a lot of them out there, and that includes Paulette Harlow, the 75-year-old woman in poor health who the Biden-Harris administration sent to prison for peacefully protesting outside a clinic. Trump also criticized Harris for the questions they have directed toward federal judicial nominees who are members of the Knights of Columbus. He said, "The radical leftist ideology that Kamala supports is really militantly hostile toward the United States of faith." She viciously attacked highly qualified judicial nominees simply because they were members of the Knights of Columbus, suggesting that their Catholic faith disqualified them from serving on the federal judiciary, Trump stressed. When Brian Bisher's nomination to the U.S. District Court for the District of Nebraska was brought up in 2018, then Senator Harris asked him if he knew that the Knights of Columbus opposed a woman's right to choose when he joined the organization, and whether he knew that the Knights of Columbus opposed equal marriage when he joined the organization. In his response to Harris, Bisher said, "The Knights of Columbus is a Roman Catholic service organization with approximately 2 million members worldwide." Trump also reiterated his pledge to create a new federal task force to combat anti-Christian bias, and its mission will be to investigate all forms of illegal discrimination, harassment, and persecution against Christians in America. During the 2020 election cycle, the Trump campaign established a coalition for Catholic outreach called Catholics for Trump, which was led by American Conservative Union Chairman Matt Schlapp, U.S. House Speaker Newt Gingrich, and political consultant Mary Matlin. CNA contacted the Trump campaign to ask if a similar effort had been launched for the 2024 election, but did not receive a response by press time. Trump describes himself as a non-denominational Christian. His running mate, J.D. Vance, is a convert to Catholicism. Biden is Catholic and Harris is Baptist.
If you notice in the above paragraph of what we have now read, it says that he reiterated his pledge to create a new federal task force to combat anti-Christian bias, and its mission will be to investigate all forms of discrimination, harassment, and persecution and legal against Christians in the United States. In fact, these very words applied in different places are what Pope Francis advocates. The language of the first beast is being the same as the second, and I wait if these very good ones are committing in the worshippers of religious liberty until they prevail, and then everything they have advocated will go down the drain. But this is the way to win everyone over to what they want. It's impressive. It's a strategic move of great value, certainly. That's Kamala Harris. This is a Catholic media, the most progressive, left-wing candidate for the U.S. government. There are those who have described her as more to the left of Bernie Sanders, which is no small thing. You already know that Bernie Sanders here is practically considered a communist, right? Well, then, why are the Vatican media, the Catholic media, talking about these conditions that this candidate has? Now you will see.
Kamala Harris will face Donald Trump in the November 2024 election, following President Joe Biden's resignation from the presidential race and virtual domination by the Democratic Party. Religiously speaking, he was raised by a Christian father and a Hindu mother, and is married to Douglas M. Hoff, a Jewish male educated in a Reform synagogue. Born in Oakland, California, her parents were civil rights activists, with whom she grew up as they spent all their time marching and shouting for justice. She studied law, pursued a career as a prosecutor according to the social commitment breathed into the family, and served as San Francisco District Attorney and Attorney General in California, with a combative face, to the point that Donald Trump funded her campaign. His disinterest in prosecuting sexual abusers in the California Catholic Church contrasts with his dogged advocacy for abortion and the LGBTQ community.
Remember that Donald Trump financed that campaign back in the day. What things change? It's interesting, because when you watch politics you realize how disgusting it is so many times, because first they destroy each other, until by some chance they become partners for the presidency, then they love each other in droves. And so it happens everywhere, and don't people realize that this is theater and still go taking the bait? Well, yes, they take the bait and position themselves according to their preference or interests, and do not realize that behind it there is the same filth. It is sad, but this is the reality.
Her positions could pose problems for Catholic voters, a key block. Harris consistently promoted abortion, vetted Catholic judicial candidates, and opposed pregnancy centers and pro-life activists. She also takes on gender ideology and risky contraception plans that infringe on the religious freedom of business and school owners. Her potential nomination has attracted distant donors, support from governors and former presidents, and more than 1,340 delegates to the party to secure the 1,976 to guarantee her nomination. As vice chair, she led the initiative in many Biden administration efforts with tours of college campuses to promote abortion or the effort to codify Roe v. Wade into federal law on the killing of babies in their mothers' wombs. As a senator, she pressed 3 judicial nominees, Brian Bisher, Paul Mady, and Peter Phipps, on their affiliation with the Knights of Columbus. Her questions suggested that these candidates' ties to the Catholic organization might make them biased for adhering to the Church's teachings on life and marriage. During cross-examination, he posed to Bisher whether he agreed with then Supreme Knight Carl Anderson that abortion is the murder of innocents on a grand scale. And he questioned him if he knew that the Knights of Columbus opposed equal marriage. Bisher responded that the Knights of Columbus is a Roman Catholic service organization with approximately 2 million members worldwide. Kamala prosecuted oil companies that opted for fracking as a drilling method and sealed the $25 billion deal during the 2008 mortgage crisis. Her ideological agent woke is today a characteristic note. Some have described her as further to the left than Bernie Sanders, which is no small feat.
Well, you have already seen that the description they give about Kamala Harris is biased, so that the vote of the people here will go towards candidates who support Catholicism. As it is in this case, Donald Trump. Wall Street joins the crash of the rest of the stock markets with strong falls in all its indexes. And you will say, what does this have to do with everything that has been raised? Remember what we have presented about Ellen White's quote, why there will be civil war. Because of economic issues. Apart from all this, economic question. Look where this happened very recently, on the 5th. It looked like everything was calming down, but analysts are already talking that this is really not holding anywhere and it is going to blow up. It has been going on for too long already. And well, here you yourselves already know what it costs you to go and fill the shopping cart. People are complaining more and more that they can charge a lot, but they don't get enough to cover everything, less and less. And this is generating unrest. There are more and more people who are no longer living in humble residences, but in the street. And what does crime do as a consequence? Increasing. Well, all this will eventually explode. Boom. It's Kamala's crack. Trump takes advantage of the stock market crash to charge Vice President Harris. Notice how everything is encouraged so that there is absolute discontent.
Former U.S. President and Republican nominee Donald Trump used Monday's stock market crash to attack his Democratic rival, Vice President Kamala Harris, saying the markets are rejecting her candidacy. In a string of messages on the social network Truth, the New York magnate baptized the stock market fall as Kamala's crash and assured that the markets will never accept Harris for being a radical left-wing lunatic. Voters have a choice: Trump's prosperity or Kamala's crash in the Great Depression of 2024, not to mention the likelihood of World War III if these people remain in office, the Republican asserted.
You get the picture, right down to talk that, because of this, World War III may come. These are statements that, honestly, you don't even know what to say when you see this.
Wall Street plunged at the opening on Monday, with falls of more than 1,000 points in two of its main indicators, the Dow Jones Industrials and the Nasdaq, due to fears of a recession in the United States that seems to have spread to other international markets. According to analysts, volatility this Monday reaches levels not seen since the stock market crashes of March 2020, linked to the declaration of the pandemic suffered, for fear that the Federal Reserve will dictate the expected rate cut too late. In parallel, the Democratic Party concludes this Monday the vote to make official Kamala Harris as its candidate for the November 5th elections, in which she will face Trump.
And where is the Democratic Party meeting right now? Right here in Chicago. What a coincidence, right? And here we are presenting this, one of those many coincidences that happen to us.
Harris will be at the White House this Monday with the President, Joe Biden, and his national security team monitoring a possible Iranian attack on Israel in retaliation for the assassinations of two Hezbollah and Hamas leaders.
Notice that all of this is in a worldwide context of a war situation where war could break out at any time. Those of us who have followed prophecy and who know what has to happen ask ourselves, if this war in the Middle East does not break out yet, what could happen? That we might see civil war in the United States first? If that were to happen, the United States would not be able to support Israel as much as it is doing. So, according to the prophecy, Russia will come through Turkey, and Turkey in turn will also move to reach Israel. And the Jews want to raise the third temple in Jerusalem, which is precisely what has caused this war, and so many people have no idea why that is happening there. This very week, that is, just yesterday, I had received direct communication from the gentlemen of the Temple Institute, those who want to build the third temple in Jerusalem, and they have begun to publish articles again about the red cow, which they have already prepared to be sacrificed if there is no change between October and November, because it already meets the specification of what the Old Testament said. If they succeed, with the ashes of the sacrifice they can purify the people, and also the esplanade of the mosques, to raise the temple of Jerusalem. And there would be some mosques left over, wouldn't there? Everything together cannot be possible. And why the Muslim Arabs have risen up against this situation? Because they know that those cows are having the precise time to be slaughtered, and that this opportunity to have a pure red cow, without blemish, has not passed for how long? 2,000 years, and now they have it. And it fulfills the specification according to them, so that the third temple in Jerusalem can be erected, the Messiah appears, and consequently the whole world will go to worship in that temple. My house shall be called a house of prayer for all peoples, says Isaiah. And they do not apply this text to the New Jerusalem after the millennium in heaven, when the New Jerusalem comes down, but they are going to apply it now. That is why religious ecumenism, interreligious ecumenism, and, most importantly, that is why the papacy wants to position itself in Jerusalem, as it has wanted to do throughout history and has not been able to do so, not even in the Crusades. And they are the ones who are behind, together with this Zionism, which are the same, looking for the building of the third temple in Jerusalem, and unfortunately people have no idea about this. This is prophecy, and it is going to be fulfilled. The papacy will finally position itself, no longer in the Vatican of Rome, which something is going to happen there, but it will move to Jerusalem as a consequence. And from there will also appear, do you know who? The false Messiah, who will really be Satan, pretending to be Jesus, performing his miracles, and supporting Sunday as a day of rest, and not the Sabbath. At that moment, the persecution will begin against the authentic people of God, who have his sign, which is the Sabbath. And that is what is coming upon us, and then the real Christ will come. And you can imagine what will happen, can't you? Let's wrap up with the news. Kamala Harris picks Tim Walz as Formula's running mate in the 2024 U.S. election. This was as early as August 6th.
U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris has chosen Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate in the 2024 U.S. election. The Democratic presidential candidate announced Tuesday morning. The vice president is scheduled to introduce Walz at a rally in Philadelphia Tuesday night before hitting the campaign trail for a tour of 5 crucial swing states. Walz has served as Minnesota's 41st governor since 2019. He previously represented Minnesota's 1st congressional district in the U.S. Congress from 2007 until his election as governor. A staunch abortion advocate, Walz has received 100% ratings from both NARAL Pro-Choice America and the Planned Parenthood Action Fund.
You know they are funded with lots and lots of money for free abortion rights.
He joked in 2018 that his views on abortion were so extreme that Nancy Pelosi asked him to moderate. Minnesota bishops react to Walz's appointment. In a statement released Tuesday after Harris's campaign announcement, Jason Adkins, executive director of the Minnesota Catholic Conference, said the state's bishops congratulate Governor Walz on his selection as the Democratic vice presidential nominee and assure him of our prayers. The statement noted that the bishops had previously worked with Walz on a statewide child tax credit, as well as promoting the welfare of immigrants in Minnesota. However, we have also had areas of strong disagreement, including the protection of the innocent unborn from abortion, the protection of children from manifestations of gender ideology, and the importance of parental rights in education, the statement noted.
Isn't this a little reminiscent of Joe Biden? Since the Jesuits are so close to him and he is so close to the Jesuits, as well as the Pope, he has no problem with Biden either, even though he is totally supportive of the abortion issue. So they are going in the same direction. And here you see that the clergy people, they say that for some things they were working together, but there is this other thing that they have disagreements and yet they don't oppose the appointment. Once again, playing between two waters.
In some areas, such as religious freedom, we have appreciated his willingness to listen to our concerns and change course, said the bishops. As he steps into the national spotlight, the Minnesota Catholic Conference remains committed to constructive engagement with him, ensuring that Catholic perspectives are heard and respected at all levels of government. In addition to his pro-abortion policies, in 2023, Walz signed a Minnesota bill banning therapists in the state from attempting to cure people with gender dysphoria. At the same time, he signed a bill strengthening protections for parents who allow extremist transgender procedures to be performed on their children. A Lutheran and former schoolteacher, Walz has been married to his wife, Gwen, for 30 years. They share 2 children.
Well, you see, they don't position themselves as absolute opposites, but go about negotiating with him, and so they are always with one and with the other. But in the end, working to impose what they want. Biden has absolutely no confidence in a peaceful transition of power after the elections. Oops, well, if it's not peaceful at all, you know how it's going to be, don't you? August 8th.
Joe Biden has expressed Wednesday that he has serious doubts about the possibility that power has been transferred peacefully in January 2025, after the presidential elections to be held in the country on November 5th. The U.S. president lashed out at the Republican candidate. If Trump wins, no, I have no confidence at all. I mean, if Trump loses, I have no confidence at all, he said during an interview with CBS News. He speaks his mind. We don't take him seriously. He's serious about it. That whole "if we lose, there will be a bloodbath, it will have been a stolen election," Biden said, referring to Trump's warning at a rally in Dayton, Ohio in March. You can't love your country only when you win, the president asserted. What did Trump say? In his speech in Dayton on March 16th, Trump predicted a bloodbath if he loses the election in November. "If I'm not elected, it will be a bloodbath for everybody. It will be a bloodbath for the country," he exclaimed. He also warned that if he is not elected, American democracy will have come to an end. "If we don't win this election, I don't think there will be another election in this country," he maintained.
These are statements which really cannot leave anyone in total tranquility. It is impossible. A bloodbath if they don't win. Now imagine if Harris wins, what's going to happen here? November 5th is the election. How many months until then? Do you know that you can go to civil war in a very short time and the whole American dream will go down the drain? That's tough, huh?
Trump has said before that, if he won, there would be no more elections. And now if he loses, there will be no more elections either. Therefore, yes or yes. That's it.
Pope Francis praises the Knights of Columbus for their efforts to form men of faith and family. Look, Kamala Harris criticizes them. Trump defends them. And who else is coming out now? Why, of course, Pope Francis. It was from August 9th.
Pope Francis sent a message of support to the annual convention of the Knights of Columbus held this week in Quebec, Canada, expressing his profound gratitude to the Catholic fraternal group for its concrete witness to the faith that works through love. In the letter, sent on behalf of the Pope by Vatican Secretary of State Cardinal Pietro Parolin, the Holy Father says the theme for this year's Knights Convention, on mission, is close to his heart and a good reminder that every Christian is called to be a missionary to the extent that he has encountered the love of God in Jesus Christ. The men's charitable group, founded by Blessed Michael McGivney, a priest, from its origins, has devoted great attention to the formation of its members as men of faith and family, the Pope added.
Faith, family, what is this in last term? To follow the traditional and, of course, moral. Where is the papacy going to return to power? What does the prophecy say? Through moral. The Knights of Columbus on mission, that is, to make Catholicism grow, yes or yes, through charity and other things they can do.
Over the generations, Knights have worked to strengthen family life through programs of catechesis and spiritual growth, have given public witness to the centrality of the family as the fundamental cell of society, and have supported a variety of initiatives to support families in their indispensable social and educational mission. He continued, making special mention of the Knights SAR initiative aimed at deepening the faith of Catholic men. This historic commitment has included a particular concern for transmitting the faith to the new generations, instilling solid values, and accompanying young people in a growth towards maturity as men and women of integrity, wisdom, and service to the communities in which they live, Pope Francis said. Supreme Knight Patrick E. Kelly announced at the meeting that the organization, which now has more than 2 million members worldwide, spent more than 47 million hours serving and sacrificing for the good of others, and set a new record for charitable giving last year with $190 million US. Together with the charitable activities of your local councils around the world, your order continues to provide exceptional support and encouragement for efforts to defend God's gift of life at every stage of its development, to defend the dignity of the institution of marriage, and to promote the mission of the Church in developing countries, Pope Francis wrote.
Do you see these initiatives as very bad? No, don't you? In favor of the family, in favor of helping society. But what does the Bible say? What your left hand does, don't let your right hand know about it. In reality, they function like Freemasonry. Rotary clubs, for example. The more you give, the more recognized you are. And they work to get more so they have the credit to say, I did it. Is this Christianity?
In addition, he also praised the Knights' efforts to rebuild and restore Christian communities in the Middle East devastated by persecution, as well as efforts to help the war-affected poor in Ukraine. Earlier this year, the Knights indicated having raised $22 million and delivered £7.7 million in supplies to victims of the ongoing war. He also mentioned the group's impressive witness to faith in Christ through its recent promotion of the National Eucharistic Pilgrimage, a U.S.-wide effort from May through July to walk 6,500 collective miles, more than 10,460 kilometers, with the Eucharist and invite tens of thousands of Catholics to participate in the walk.
The Knights of Columbus, you see, they were promoters of all this. And you see, once again, the boast, look at all we've done.
The pilgrimage culminated at the National Eucharistic Congress in Indianapolis in mid-July. Pope Francis also noted that restoration of the historic baldachin above the altar of St. Peter's Basilica is underway, funded by the Knights of Columbus. The restoration of the baldachin is being done to coincide with the start of the 2025 Jubilee Year of Hope.
A year that will be truly special for Catholics and for the entire world.
His Holiness prays that the graces of the Holy Year will be poured out in abundance on the Knights and their families as they strive to fulfill their baptismal mission to be a leaven of peace and holiness in our human family, weary of war and longing for the peace that only Christ can give, the Pope wrote.
And in the end it is this. People will be tired of war. They will want peace. And whoever supports them in achieving that, will they not praise him? Will they not follow him? For that is the ground that the papacy is preparing. And it is also being prepared here in the United States.
The pontiff concluded by commending the Knights to the maternal protection of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and added that he cordially imparts to the Knights and their families his blessing as a pledge of joy and peace in the Lord. The 142nd Supreme Convention of the Knights concluded today with Mass and a final business session.
Therefore, the maternal protection of the Blessed Virgin Mary must always be there, and the world will be subdued through virgins. Why do you think there is the Virgin in China, the Virgin in I don't know where, the Virgin in I don't know how much, and why Islam also with Fatima? All this did not happen just because. And this is what we will present in public conferences, God willing, there in Girona, which will be broadcast live, where we will talk precisely about what has happened throughout history, which has led to what has been imposed on the Virgin Mary, in attributes, and it is so much that the day she raises her head, she will be surprised at what has been done to her figure, to her person. But this has a 6,000-year historical trajectory. Unbelievable, well, Trump says Russia and China do not respect the United States. August 9th.
The United States is in a dangerous position because Russia and China no longer respect it, said the Republican candidate for the U.S. presidency, Donald Trump, during a press conference. According to Trump, the United States has never had this danger, both from an economic point of view and from an external perspective. Russia no longer respects us, China no longer respects us, Kim Jong-un from North Korea was very fond of me, he said, adding that since he ceased to be president of the United States, the country has lost this respect. He also noted that during his tenure, he and Chinese ruler Xi Jinping were very good friends. I think our country right now is in the most dangerous situation in its history from an economic and security standpoint, both because of street gangs and, frankly, gangs operating outside of our country, other countries that are, frankly, very powerful, he said. We have leaders who have no idea how to handle them or how to handle any other situation, he said, before arguing that the country is on the verge of a depression and is even facing a world war. Previously, the politician repeatedly claimed that he has a very good relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Trump noted that, had he remained in the White House, Moscow would not have launched the special military operation in Ukraine. It did it after I left, he stressed.
And this is not all. Well, it's funny that he says he had a good relationship with Putin when he called him a murderer and stayed so broad, isn't it? But well, those things this gentleman has. Trump attacks a Maine Caliph harshly. I'd like to congratulate the young woman who transitioned from man to boxer. This also has to do with the Olympics. You know that there was a big controversy because this person boxed, and when she was going to give the first punch, whom she had in front of her, which was an Italian, and she left practically crying on her legs, because she said, "One punch and she'll kill me." Well, all this has raised, of course, the great controversy of whether she was really a woman or not. There was a Chinese woman who was in the same conditions and who took advantage of this, as you can see.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump on Friday attacked Algerian Olympic pugilist Maine Caliph, whom he branded a man, and accused his Democratic rival, Kamala Harris, of wanting men to participate in women's sports. I would like to congratulate the young woman who transitioned from a man to a boxer. Trump has assured, referring to Caliph, who was questioned on social networks of being biologically a man after a bout during the Paris Olympics against Italian Angela Carini, who quit in tears 46 seconds after stepping into the ring. The Republican presidential candidate for the White House has addressed Carini as the beautiful Italian boxer, who entered the ring without knowing what was going on, and without counting that he, referring to the Algerian pugilist, was in the ring. It's crazy what they're doing, and this person won the gold medal. And she, Harris, wants it. She wants men to participate in women's sports, the former president said while addressing the crowd at a campaign event in the city of Bozeman, Montana. In a state where he has the vote practically assured, the New York magnate has blamed, during his speech, Harris's running mate, Tim Walz, for defending socialism and for being too liberal on issues related to transgender children. He mandated tampons in boys' bathrooms in the state of Minnesota, where he governs. This is his ideology. This is why Harris elected him, he has asserted.
Well, we'll skip this part, because we're already seeing how everyone is using for the same thing. Some super moralists, the others, quite the opposite. People must decide either to sink a country or to return to a Christianity. And that is only one solution. It is a dictatorship with what is ordered. One is not going to recognize the victory of the other and vice versa. What is coming? 7 facts you need to know about Kamala Harris's pick for U.S. vice presidential candidate. Pro-abortion through the 9th month and LGBT plus ideology, so is Kamala Harris's VP candidate pick. This was as early as August 12th, and also, sure enough, from a Catholic media outlet.
Kamala Harris, candidate of the Progressive Democratic Party for the presidency of the United States, announced last August 6 that Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, will be her running mate and therefore the candidate of the most radical left for the vice presidency of the United States. 1st. Point, his origins. Originally from Nebraska, he moved to Mankato, Minnesota, after meeting his current wife, Gwen, with whom he has 2 children. Both were high school teachers. It was during this teaching stint that he began his support for the cause of gender ideology. In 2018, he was elected governor of Minnesota, a position to which he was re-elected in 2022. Second point, woke, progressive, and ultra and left. Walz has the support of the most leftist and pro-green wing of the Democratic Party, from Nancy Pelosi to Bernie Sanders, currently independent. Third point, in favor of abortion even in the 9th month of pregnancy. Walz supports abortion of babies in the 9th month of pregnancy. In fact, in 2023, he enacted a law allowing the murder of a 9-month-old baby in the womb. The law is called the Reproductive Choice Protection Act and was enshrined as a fundamental right in state law. The law includes making it impossible for parents of minor girls to receive information about whether or not their own daughters have had an abortion. Polls in the state of Minnesota showed support for abortion, but not for unlimited or all-stage abortion. Under Walz, babies born alive after abortions have been left to fend for themselves by eliminating reporting requirements. In fact, since the Walz government, it is no longer mandatory to keep a registry of live-born babies. Fourth point, religious freedom violator. Walz has several lawsuits for violations of religious freedom. Most of them date back to the pandemic period because while he allowed rallies in other places, he banned them in churches. In 2020, he was sued by the Thomas More Society. He also refused to support funding for programs at religious schools that gave free credit to students. In 2023, he signed a law excluding church school students for free college credit. Fifth point, pro-agenda, LGBT+ and child mutilation. Walz supports hormone underage boys who feel they are women and even genital mutilation operations that, by nature, are irreversible in nature. This support became an executive order as government. Sixth point, Lutheran. Walz is a Lutheran, a progressive branch of Protestant Christianity where there is now room for everything. In fact, it is considered the most liberal denomination in American Christianity. 20% of Minnesota's population is Lutheran. Walz is known to attend Christmas services at Pilgrim Lutheran Church in St. Paul. Seventh point, pro-Muslim. Since Minnesota has a significant Muslim population, Walz has been very flexible and understanding with them. He is a recurring attendee of events organized by the Muslim community.
Well, you have already seen that the description they are giving him in the Catholic media is so that no Catholic will vote for him, just like Kamala Harris. They are showing that there is such an exaggerated polarity that logically a Catholic and cannot support any of this. But only Catholics? No Christians. So, imagine what a perfect trap for Christians that they will go support someone who will then go against religious freedom, against the Saturday. But it all looks so good, doesn't it? They are certainly leading the American people to a truly irreversible decision. Biden imposes homosexual, transgender mandate worldwide. Blinken explained that the new interpretation was necessary to provide a clear framework for U.S. advocacy on homosexual/transgender issues abroad. August 14th. And where is it excerpted from? From a Catholic media outlet as well. So they are already totally setting the tone that this government is out of step with the Christian world. And what does that do? Christians, seeing all this, logically react and do not want this to happen in their country. Well, I am going to skip all this, because it is more or less part of what we have seen in the headline. Here they give details and details of this whole issue and make it clear that for them the further away the better. Well, up to here the summary of news and go to a lot of news. Obviously there are others that I have left aside and that were in the same consonants. But I think it is enough to see how absolutely everything is being delineated in this country to achieve an objective. Now what we are going to do is to continue with the reading of the great controversy. And after having seen all this news and seeing where the prophecy is going, then tell me if Christ is not really coming back very, very soon. But the beast with lamb-like horns spake as a dragon, and he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword, and did live. Revelation 13, verses 11 to 14. What is this? Making an image of the beast that received the wound by a sword? Who received the wound by a sword? We have seen that it was the papacy. In the French Revolution, they are cut off. It seems that the papal power is over, but immediately it begins to resurface and to regain power. Already in 1929, Mussolini, what does he do? He offers again to the Vatican the properties, the lands, and a lot of money. And so the story that we already know goes on. The lamb-like horns and dragon voice of the symbol point to a striking contradiction between the professions and the practice of the nation thus represented. The speaking of the nation is the action of its legislative and judicial authorities. By such action it will give the lie to those liberal and peaceful principles which it has put forth as the foundation of its policy. The prediction that it will speak as a dragon and exercise all the power of the first beast plainly foretells a development of the spirit of intolerance and persecution that was manifested by the nations represented by the dragon and the leopard-like beast. What did the papacy do for 1,260 years? It was persecuting authentic Christians. What will the United States do? And the statement that the beast with two horns causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast indicates that the authority of this nation is to be exercised in enforcing some observance which shall be an act of homage to the papacy. And what could be the homage to the papacy? A statue to the Pope? An obelisk? They already have it. It's already in Washington. Such action would be directly contrary to the principles of this government, to the genius of its free institutions, to the direct and solemn avowals of the Declaration of Independence, and to the Constitution. The founders of the nation wisely sought to guard against the employment of secular power on the part of the Church, with its inevitable result, intolerance and persecution. What happened in Europe? Do you remember? Could the papacy directly execute people? No. But it tried them and took them to civil society, and then judgment was passed. Some of them were viciously tortured, and many more were executed. What is going to happen now with the civilian power? It will do the same thing. It will be the executing hand of that religious power. The Constitution provides that Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, and that no religious test shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States. Only in flagrant violation of these safeguards to the nation's liberty can any religious observance be enforced by civil authority. But the inconsistency of such action is no greater than is represented in the symbol. It is the beast with lamb-like horns, in profession pure, gentle, and harmless, that speaks as a dragon, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast. Here is clearly presented a form of government in which the legislative power rests with the people, a most striking evidence that the United States is the nation denoted in the prophecy. That's true, isn't it? But what is the image to the beast? And how is it to be formed? The image is made by the two-horned beast, and is an image to the first beast. It is also called an image of the beast. Then to learn what the image is like and how it is to be formed, we must study the characteristics of the beast itself, the papacy. When the early church became corrupted by departing from the simplicity of the gospel and accepting heathen rites and customs, she lost the spirit and power of God. And in order to control the consciences of the people, she sought the support of the secular power. The result was the papacy, a church that controlled the power of the state and employed it to further her own ends, especially for the punishment of heresy. And I wonder who the heretics really were. In order for the United States to form an image of the beast, the religious power must so control the civil government that the authority of the state will also be employed by the church to accomplish her own ends. Whenever the church has obtained secular power, she has employed it to punish dissent from her doctrines. Protestant churches that have followed in the steps of Rome by forming alliance with worldly powers have manifested a similar desire to restrict liberty of conscience. An example of this is given in the long-continued persecution of dissenters by the Church of England. During the 16th and 17th centuries, thousands of nonconformist ministers were forced to flee from their churches, and many, both of pastors and people, were subjected to fine, imprisonment, torture, and martyrdom. Will we learn the lesson of the past? If we forget the past, we will be at a disadvantage, because this same thing will happen again. It was apostasy that led the early church to seek the aid of the civil government, and this prepared the way for the development of the papacy, the beast. Said Paul, "There shall come a falling away, and that man of sin be revealed." 2 Thessalonians 2 verse 3. So apostasy in the church will prepare the way for the image to the beast. The Bible declares that before the coming of the Lord there will exist a state of religious declension similar to that in the first centuries. In the last days, perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce-breakers, false accusers, incontinent, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasures more than lovers of God, having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. 2 Timothy 3 verses 1 to 5. Notice that they will have the form of godliness. All that we have seen is that, the form of godliness, but in the end there will be no real conversion. That is why they will be as they are described. This is the point humanity is reaching at a dizzying rate, with the United States leading the way. Now the Spirit speaketh expressly, that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits, and doctrines of devils. 1 Timothy 4 verse 1. And here is the part that is coming, Spiritism. Spiritism as it has never been seen on earth. Satan will work with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness. And all that received not the love of the truth, that they might be saved, will be left to accept strong delusion, that they should believe a lie. 2 Thessalonians 2 verses 9 to 11. That is, if you reject the truth, you will accept the lie. There is no other option. When this state of ungodliness shall be reached, the same results will follow as in the first centuries. The wide diversity of belief in the Protestant churches is regarded by many as decisive proof that no effort to secure a forced uniformity can ever be made. But there has been for years, in churches of the Protestant faith, a strong and growing sentiment in favor of a union based upon common points of doctrine. We are talking about the year 1884, To secure such a union, the discussion of subjects upon which all were not agreed, however important they might be from a Bible standpoint, must necessarily be waived. Charles Beecher, in a sermon in the year 1846. I had told you 1884, but it was 1846. declared that the ministry of the evangelical Protestant denominations is not only formed all the way up under a tremendous pressure of merely human fear, but they live and move and breathe in a state of things radically corrupt, and appealing every hour to every baser element of their nature to hush up the truth and bow the knee to the power of apostasy. Was not this the way things went with Rome? Are we not living her life over again? And what do we see just ahead? Another General Council, a World's Convention, Evangelical Alliance, and Universal Creed. This was a sermon delivered at Fort Wayne, Indiana, on February 22, 1846. When this shall be gained, then, in the effort to secure complete uniformity, it will be only a step to the resort to force. Look, this has been in the works for years, Satan has been moving it, and now it is reaching its limit. When the leading churches of the United States, uniting upon such points of doctrine as are held by them in common, shall influence the state to enforce their decrees and to sustain their institutions, then Protestant America will have formed an image of the Roman hierarchy, and the infliction of civil penalties upon dissenters will inevitably result. Therefore, the Protestants are going to unite to go against whom? Against the authentic people of God. They are going to pressure the government to do so. The beast with two horns causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand, or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Revelation 13, verses 16 to 17. You all know what this refers to, don't you? The famous what number? 666. The third angel's warning is, if any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead, or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God. The beast mentioned in this message, whose worship is enforced by the two-horned beast, is the first, or leopard-like beast of Revelation 13, the papacy. The image to the beast represents that form of apostate Protestantism, that is, it splits from the truth, which will be developed when the Protestant churches shall seek the aid of the civil power for the enforcement of their dogmas. That is, they will ask the government to help them implement what they believe in. The mark of the beast still remains to be defined. Thank God, that's what we have dealt with, and we are going to deal with, hopefully someday, in a very deep way, what that mark of the beast means, that number 666. But here she is going to tell us something about the mark of the beast. After the warning against the worship of the beast and his image, the prophecy declares, here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. Since those who keep God's commandments are thus placed in contrast with those that worship the beast and his image and receive his mark, it follows that the keeping of God's law, on the one hand, and its violation, on the other, will make the distinction between the worshippers of God and the worshippers of the beast. The special characteristic of the beast, and therefore of his image, is the breaking of God's commandments. Says Daniel, of the little horn, the papacy, he shall think to change times and the law. Daniel 7 verse 25. And Paul styled the same power the man of sin, who was to exalt himself above God. One prophecy is a complement of the other. Only by changing God's law could the papacy exalt itself above God. Whoever should understandingly keep the law as thus changed would be giving supreme honor to that power by which the change was made. Such an act of obedience to papal laws would be a mark of allegiance to the Pope in the place of God. The papacy has attempted to change the law of God. The second commandment, forbidding image worship, has been dropped from the law, and the fourth commandment has been so changed as to authorize the observance of the first instead of the seventh day as the Sabbath. But papists urge, as a reason for omitting the second commandment, that it is unnecessary, being included in the first, and that they are giving the law exactly as God designed it to be understood. This cannot be the change foretold by the prophet. An intentional, deliberate change is presented. He shall think to change the times and the law. The change in the fourth commandment exactly fulfills the prophecy. For this, the only authority claimed is that of the church. Here, the papal power openly sets itself above God. While the worshippers of God will be especially distinguished by their regard for the fourth commandment, since this is the sign of His creative power and the witness to His claim upon man's reverence and homage, the worshippers of the beast will be distinguished by their efforts to tear down the Creator's memorial, to exalt the institution of Rome. It was in behalf of the Sunday that Popery first asserted its arrogant claims. It says, see the appendix. Further explanations are given in the appendix. And its first resort to the power of the state was to compel the observance of Sunday as the Lord's Day. But the Bible points to the seventh day, and not to the first, as the Lord's Day. Said Christ, the Son of Man is Lord also of the Sabbath. The fourth commandment declares, the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord. And by the prophet Isaiah, the Lord designates it, my holy day. Mark 2 verse 28, Isaiah 58 verse 13. The claim so often put forth that Christ changed the Sabbath is disproved by His own words. In His Sermon on the Mount He said, think not that I am come to destroy the law, or the prophets. I am not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For verily I say unto you, till heaven and earth pass, one jot or one tittle shall in no wise pass from the law, till all be fulfilled. Whosoever therefore shall break one of these least commandments, and shall teach men so, he shall be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whosoever shall do and teach them, the same shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. Matthew 5 verses 17 to 19. It is a fact generally admitted by Protestants that the Scriptures give no authority for the change of the Sabbath. This is plainly stated in publications issued by the American Tract Society and the American Sunday School Union. One of these works acknowledges the complete silence of the New Testament so far as any explicit command for the Sabbath, Sunday, the first day of the week, or definite rules for its observance are concerned. This appears in George Eliot's book, and this book that is quoted. Another says, up to the time of Christ's death, no change had been made in the day, and, so far as the record shows, they, the apostles, did not give any explicit command enjoining the abandonment of the seventh-day Sabbath and its observance on the first day of the week. Roman Catholics acknowledge that the change of the Sabbath was made by their church, and declare that Protestants, by observing the Sunday, are recognizing her power. Do you realize what a slam dunk? Protestants are subject to Rome for observing Sunday. It is their authority, not the Bible. In the Catholic Catechism of Christian Religion, in answer to a question as to the day to be observed in obedience to the fourth commandment, this statement is made: during the Old Law, Saturday was the day sanctified, but the Church, instructed by Jesus Christ and directed by the Spirit of God, has substituted Sunday for Saturday, so now we sanctify the first, not the seventh day. Sunday means, and now is, the day of the Lord. Quite a fraudulent change, eh? As the sign of the authority of the Catholic Church, Papist writers cite the very act of changing the Sabbath into Sunday, which Protestants allow of, because by keeping Sunday, they acknowledge the Church's power to ordain feasts and to command them under sin. And here is a quote where it is taken from. What then is the change of the Sabbath, but the sign, or mark, of the authority of the Roman Church, the mark of the beast? The Roman Church has not relinquished her claim to supremacy, and when the world and the Protestant churches accept a Sabbath of her creating, while they reject the Bible Sabbath, they virtually admit this assumption. They may claim the authority of tradition and of the fathers for the change, but in so doing they ignore the very principle which separates them from Rome, that the Bible, and the Bible only, is the religion of Protestants. The papist can see that they are deceiving themselves, willingly closing their eyes to the facts in the case. As the movement for Sunday enforcement gains favor, he rejoices, feeling assured that it will eventually bring the whole Protestant world under the banner of Rome. All the Protestant world under the banner of Rome, remember Indianapolis, that procession? They were going to win the whole world for that. Romanists declare that the observance of Sunday by the Protestants is an homage they pay, in spite of themselves, to the authority of the Catholic Church. The enforcement of Sunday keeping on the part of Protestant churches is an enforcement of the worship of the papacy, of the beast. Those who, understanding the claims of the fourth commandment, choose to observe the false instead of the true Sabbath are thereby paying homage to that power by which alone it is commanded. But in the very act of enforcing a religious duty by secular power, the churches would themselves form an image to the beast. Hence, the enforcement of Sunday keeping in the United States would be an enforcement of the worship of the beast and his image. And this is what is being prepared with everything that is happening. But Christians of past generations observed the Sunday, supposing that in so doing they were keeping the Bible Sabbath, and there are now true Christians in every church, not accepting the Roman Catholic Communion, who honestly believe that Sunday is the Sabbath of divine appointment. God accepts their sincerity of purpose and their integrity before Him. But when Sunday observance shall be enforced by law, and the world shall be enlightened concerning the obligation of the true Sabbath, then whoever shall transgress the command of God, to obey a precept which has no higher authority than that of Rome, will thereby honor popery above God. He is paying homage to Rome and to the power which enforces the institution ordained by Rome. He is worshiping the beast and his image. As men then reject the institution which God has declared to be the sign of his authority, and honor in its stead that which Rome has chosen as the token of her supremacy, they will thereby accept the sign of allegiance to Rome, the mark of the beast. And it is not until the issue is thus plainly set before the people, and they are brought to choose between the commandments of God and the commandments of men, that those who continue in transgression will receive the mark of the beast. The most fearful threatening ever addressed to mortals is contained in the third angel's message. That must be a terrible sin which calls down the wrath of God unmingled with mercy. Men are not to be left in darkness concerning this important matter. The warning against this sin is to be given to the world before the visitation of God's judgments, that all may know why they are to be inflicted, and have opportunity to escape them. Prophecy declares that the first angel would make his announcement to every nation, and kindred, and tongue, and people. The warning of the third angel, which forms a part of the same threefold message, is to be no less widespread. It is represented in the prophecy as being proclaimed with a loud voice by an angel flying in the midst of heaven, and it will command the attention of the world. And you know that when Ellen White here writes about the third angel, she is also speaking of the fourth, which is the one that empowers the message of the third, the one we are giving. In the issue of the contest, all Christendom will be divided into two great classes, those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus, and those who worship the beast and his image and receive his mark. Although church and state will unite their power to compel all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, Revelation 13 verse 16, to receive the mark of the beast, yet the people of God will not receive it. The prophet of Patmos beholds them that had gotten the victory over the beast, and over his image, and over his mark, and over the number of his name, stand on the sea of glass, having the harps of God and singing the song of Moses and the Lamb. Revelation 15 verses 2-3. Till here the reading of this chapter of the conflict of the centuries. Are you seeing a parallelism with everything that is happening? Are we aware that we are living prophecy and it is the final prophecy? We are going to conclude with this quote, "Gifts for the people of God." It is a morning paper that was edited and appears in a writing of Ellen White. Next quote is taken from Testimonies for the Church, Volume 5, page 450, paragraph 2. The same masterful mind that plotted against the faithful in ages past is still seeking to rid the earth of those who fear God and obey His law. Satan will excite indignation against the humble minority who conscientiously refuse to accept popular customs and traditions. Men of position and reputation will join with the lawless and the vile to take counsel against the people of God. Wealth, genius, education will combine to cover them with contempt. Persecuting rulers, ministers, and church members will conspire against them. With voice and pen, by boasts, threats, and ridicule, they will seek to overthrow their faith. By false representations and angry appeals, they will stir up the passions of the people. Not having thus set the Scriptures to bring against the advocates of the Bible Sabbath, they will resort to oppressive enactments to supply the lack. To secure popularity and patronage, legislators will yield to the demand for Sunday law. Those who fear God cannot accept an institution that violates a precept of the Decalogue. Therefore, the legislators will give in to the demand for a Dominic law. And the whole conflict will lead to this, that the people will want a solution, and the solution to the evils, moral, economic, and others of society will be, according to them, to impose Sunday as a day of rest. But things will not improve, things will continue to be bad. And then, what are they going to do? Blame those people who do not submit to these divine guidelines in quotation marks. They will be contrary to the behavior of all, and they will be, of course, fined, taken to prison, expropriated, martyred, and many of them, consequently, killed. That is what awaits the people of God everywhere. But here you see the signs that indicate that it is coming. And everyone should be watching for the United States. Any believer in prophecy should follow. The end is near. If we know that Jesus returns at the end of the 6,000 years since the entrance of sin, we know that that is precisely 7 years from now, between September and October 2031. So, 7 years remaining. But start subtracting. The last year is going to be time of plagues, the 7 final plagues. There will be no solution there. There is no more change from one side to the other. Each one has made his decision. The earth is going to be in shambles. Well, you can imagine how, and the inhabitants the same. But 3.5 years before the return of Christ, the Sunday law comes in. Trouble is coming for God's people. That's 2028. Are we prepared for all that? Do people know all this? They don't know. Catholicism is going to tighten the screws to the hilt in America so that the people will yield to their power, and the Protestants are going to join them. But the real people of God will not, but will remain loyal to the Sabbath. This is what is coming. But you know, something is going to empower, something is going to cause nobody, practically nobody, to oppose that Sunday law and accept what they say. Do you know what it is going to be? Well, this is what we are going to present soon, in the new series of conferences, because there is something that is going to be fulfilled soon. And they are the satanic manifestations that the text said, in an amazing way, with miracles, with impressive things, that are going to lead people to accept the satanic deception through their senses. Even the elect, many will fall, because before the perspective of what they are going to see, of what they are going to experience, they will give in. They will doubt the truth and will leave the Sabbath aside and will side with the opponents. All of that is what we will be talking about soon, God willing. May we remain steadfast and whatever happens to us, while we make known to the world what is coming, so that many will wake up, and it must be said before it happens, so that when it happens, they will believe, and thus they can be saved. The Lord is coming, that is the hope. Whatever happens to us, then we will have the perfect eternity, as we never imagined. Maranatha, the Lord is coming, 2031. God bless you.